Guys! Guys! You won't believe it! My NES came in! I can't wait to start using this thing. How else am I gonna play games like Hoops? Well, let's get this baby started up and get to playing. Huh. It doesn't work. Dang it, these things are expensive too. Well, I guess I should use it for something else, like a drink table perhaps? That'll do. Picture this. It's the late 70s, and you are Atari. You're the top dog of the video game industry. Everyone loves going home and playing on their Ataris. Who cares if the box art looks like this, and the game looks like this? Who cares if it is nearly impossible to tell that this game was made for this console because there's like nothing on the box that said so? Who cares if almost every game released was a low quality, boring piece of trash? Everyone loves playing on their Atari systems. I'm sure this will help Atari to last long into the future. What? You want to make a game about E.T.? You want it to be super ambitious and complicated, thus making the game confusing and boring? Go for it, Atari. Everyone loves you. There's no way something like this could fail. Oh shoot, it failed. Uh-oh. Looks like people aren't starting to like their Atari systems as much. Or video games in general. Seems like people don't trust these things and are moving on. Video games are just a fad. Let's go play with our new robot toys. And thus is the legend of the video game crash of 1983. There's a lot of other factors that went into it, probably enough where I could make a whole video about it someday if I really cared to. But the gist of it is pretty much what I just explained. People just didn't trust video games enough to actually be, you know, high quality products, and just saw them as a toy or a cash grab. But things were very different in a place I like to call Japan. And that was all because of a company known as Nintendo. Originally starting out as a card game company and eventually becoming a full-on toy company, Nintendo saw how popular video games were becoming and decided that they wanted a piece of that action. They released a few arcade games, and most of them were pretty unpopular, except for one known as Donkey Kong. Eventually, Nintendo creates a home video game system known as the Famicom and releases it in Japan, and this thing was popular. The graphics on it looked way nicer than the Atari, and the games were actually fun this time around. Nintendo had created a video game platform that people actually respected, and they wanted to release this thing in North America. But this was at the same time that the crash happened, so that was not going to be easy. Bringing the Famicom over to North America was going to require some work. The North American people didn't trust video games because of what had happened with Atari, so Nintendo needed to convince people why their new console was actually worth anything. They redesigned the thing so it would look like a home computer and renamed it to the Nintendo Entertainment System. In fact, Nintendo would not refer to anything related to this as a video game. They called the system an entertainment system, and the cartridges were called game packs. This didn't change the fact that it was still a video game console though, and most retailers wouldn't even stock the NES for fear of it never selling. So Nintendo had to pull an ace from their sleeve. Do you remember what I said earlier? Video games are just a fad. Let's go play with our new robot toys. Nintendo created the Robotic Operating Buddy, or ROB for short, and packaged it in with the NES. This guy would play games with you and was Nintendo's key to success. ROB got a lot of people to actually look at the NES because, well, it comes with a robot. That's so cool. There were only 2 games that had compatibility with ROB, Gyromite and Stack Up. And Rob was also incredibly slow and didn't really do a good job playing the games. But that was never his intention. This guy was just supposed to be a Trojan horse to convince kids to want an NES, and, I mean, it worked. Rob is also an incredibly interesting piece of video game history, and I could make a whole nother video about him if I really wanted to. But I'm just keeping it brief for the purposes of this video. Another thing that Nintendo did to make sure that the console didn't flop like how Atari did was release their first few games using the black box template. It's pretty simple. Instead of showing off artwork based off the game and tricking the consumer into thinking they were gonna get something like this, they put a sprite from the game itself on the box to keep people's expectations in check. I mean, this works for games like Mario or for a sports game or something, but for like Stack Up or Clue Clue Land, who looked at this and said, yes, this is what I want. Nintendo also created the Nintendo Official Seal of Quality, and this is a very good thing. This meant that Nintendo was controlling the games that were being released on this console so that it wouldn't be flooded with absolute terribleness incarnate its whole life. I mean, it kind of was, but I think that's just an issue with some of these games not aging the best. Nintendo kept the black box design for a bit before changing it to actual artwork once people started to trust the NES more. How have I talked about the thing around the games for this long without actually talking about the games themselves? The NES had some amazing games, but of course, we gotta start here. Super Mario Bros. Was a pack-in game with the NES and was probably one of the sole reasons for its success. This game is a masterpiece in every aspect. The level design is perfect, the music is stellar, the sprite work still holds up to this day. It's just such a good game. And it makes so much sense how after all these years it is still regarded as one of the best games of all time. But Mario wasn't the only game on this box. We've also got games like Excitebike. To this day, I still don't understand how this game works, but I mean, I guess it's fun. It has a level editor built into it too, which is impressive for its time. We've also got games like Balloon Fight, which is still an excellent party game, even now. Honestly, this game is very fun to boot up and play with a friend for a bit. The NES had some excellent single-player games, like Zelda. I won't dwell on Zelda for too long because I have plans to cover these games in the near future. But as it stands, these are some brilliant games that are a lot of fun to go back to, even now. The NES also saw the start of the Metroid series. This first game is pretty good, but I don't really know what my goal is, so I just kind of run around until I get bored. This isn't even scratching the surface. Kirby, Punch-Out, Kid Icarus, Duck Hunt, arcade games like Donkey Kong and Mario Bros. And I can't even begin to talk about the third-party releases like Mega Man, Castlevania, Contra, the list just goes on. The NES truly did house some of, if not the best games of all time. So the NES went on to become the saving grace for video games in North America and truly brought them back into popularity. But what did this mean for the future? The NES caused a resurgence in video games in North America and caused people to look at video games as something more than just a toy. That these were becoming a brand new form of media on par with something like a movie or a book. These things could tell their stories in amazing new ways because instead of watching and reading about an adventure, you are the adventurer. You get to go on these epic quests and experience these stories yourself. And while this form of media was still in its infancy during this era, the NES helped people to realize just how important video games could become. Well, that's all fine and dandy, but it doesn't matter. I finally figured out why my NES isn't working. I didn't plug the controller in. Man, I can't wait to finally get to play Well, it's a good thing I left the cap on this water bottle. I don't think I could afford to let this thing break.